The wisdom of generations of women to help you have more joy every day. The Wisdom Coalition program begins right now.
I do feel that sometimes folks hide behind the ability to be anonymous on the phone.
I think it's important to turn off phones at dinner time, and that's happening less and less.
Technology is not evil. Technology is just something we have to control. You know, the phone doesn't pick itself up.
What is the impact of technology on communication and our relationships?
Welcome to the Wisdom Coalition program. I'm Nancy Wertine.
And I'm Kim Howie. Thanks for joining us.
You know, if you're like most people, you check your phone about 80 times a day. That's according to data that Apple collects.
And that really begs the question, you know, should we be worried about all of the time that we're spending on our various devices?
Listen, our gadgets can do just about anything, which is great, but what are they doing to our relationships and to the face-to-face connections that are so important for real intimacy?
Common Sense Media says kids under 8 spend about 2 hours and 19 minutes a day fiddling with a screen, but that's an amount that has tripled in 4 years. More studies say the average teenager sends more than 3,000 text messages a month. 1 in 5 divorce petitions cite Facebook as a cause, and almost 3/4 of women in committed relationships feel that smartphones are interfering with their love life and are reducing the amount of time they spend with their partner.
So, are smartphones the third wheel in our relationships?
And really, what is all of this technology doing to our social skills?
Yeah, great questions. So we have a guest to join us now, and sometimes taking technology away gives us some of these answers. Jeremy Lataw is a professor of communication and journalism at Lehigh University. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.
So you have your students go through a social media deprivation experiment. Tell us about that.
I have them sit for a week without using any social media. They're asked to basically give up everything on their phone, nothing through the web. They can't cheat. Every kind of social media imaginable. I give them a whole list. It's about 20 different products that I know are somewhat common or not as common with this age group, and it's off the list, so they have to just go without it. They can use their phones for things, but not for social media.
And what did they think of this experiment, and what did they learn?
They usually think it's going to be pretty easy at first because they have gone on vacation before and gone without it, and they forget that sometimes that's a case of not having signal or having service. But when it's available to them and they have to actually not use it, it's different for them, and so they're a little surprised, I think, by that at first. They usually end up hating me by the end of the week because it's just, you know, they're going without it. A lot of things that they learn is how entwined social media is for them and their everyday communication. It's not the way we usually think about it, like just keeping up with others' lives. And finding out what other people are up to. They're using this to manage their own schedules. I had athletes who were talking about getting in trouble with coaches because I had one really interesting example of a football player at Lehigh who has to text his coaches every single day. Not text, but he was using the Facebook Messenger program to send a picture of what he was eating because they were trying to monitor what he was taking in. And since he didn't have access to the app and wasn't able to use it, he was getting in trouble with his coaches for not doing this. So he had to figure out workarounds. And so it's not just that they're using this to keep up with each other's lives, they're also using it to get updates on meetings they need to go to or getting a ride or going to dinner and things like that. And so that was a real big challenge for them.
So it's so ingrained in all of our lives, right, to use social media. But why do you have the students do this experiment? What is it that you want them to learn?
I want them to learn how just deeply entrenched in their own lives it is. That sometimes you have to step out of something before you can really get a full picture of just how common it is. You know, students, I had probably at least a third of them who admitted that they cheated the very first day because on accident. They woke up and the very first thing they did, just from muscle memory, was they opened up Instagram. And then they realized about halfway through they weren't supposed to be doing that. So those kinds of things are real eye-opening when you realize how automated some of this use is on their end, that they're not really thinking about it so much as they're just mindlessly pushing because that's what they're psychologically trained to do.
That makes complete sense. And so were there frustrations? Did they express any frustrations to you?
Yeah, I mean, they were frustrated. You know, it's interesting. They took away good lessons too. They realized just how pervasive this was and how mindless some of these was, but they were frustrated because it really was breaking down their social relationships. A lot of the relationships they had built were were managed by these apps, and so they really felt like there was something missing, that they didn't have. It was weird to me as a 42-year-old, but they didn't have a way to communicate with these folks if they didn't have social media, and that's a real eye opener for them. But it's frustrating too, because if you're if you take away a way in which you're used to communicating with people, of course you're going to be frustrated by that.
Great point. So we're going to talk a little bit more about communication in just a moment, and we'll have you with us again a little bit later in the show. But thanks for being with us.
All right, thanks.
And you can go to our website, thewisdomcoalition.com, and join the conversation online.
But first, more reflections on this topic from our well of wisdom.
We're really sacrificing something when we're out to lunch with girlfriend and they put their phone on the table and say, "Oh, I'm so sorry," apologize immediately, "but I'm expecting this." It's saying, it feels disrespectful, and I'm not present in the moment. You're not worthy of getting my full attention, and I'm concerned about it.
Welcome back. Science is showing that using social media actually triggers a pleasure center in our brains that makes us want to use it more and more.
Wow, and you think that is definitely going to have an impact on how we communicate with one another.
Yeah, it certainly is. Our next guest is going to help us sort all of this out. He is the author of Communicating to Win in Life, Love, and Business. Bob Paff is joining us now. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
So Bob, I would think, traditional face-to-face communication is definitely so vital, right, in our personal lives and in our professional lives. But it seems like we're losing some of that, some of our social skills as a society. Do you agree with that?
I totally agree. I mean, as you know, the pendulum swings, and I think it's swung too far to the other side, where we're relying now more on technology. We're, in my opinion, hiding behind technology. I like to say that social media and technology has given a voice and a face to people that may, I affectionately use the term geeks, that may be hid behind a lot of this stuff. Now they have a face and they have a voice, and with the flip of a switch or a push of a button, we can reach people across the world. So I think it's making us less engaging, less communicative, less sociable, less connected, and I don't like the trend. I don't like where it's going. I think it really, you can attach it to so many ills that we're experiencing really in society now is due to the breakdown of communication.
Yeah, and I read this one statistic. The Pew Research Center says that 25% of cell phone owners in a marriage or a relationship have felt their spouse or partner has been distracted by our phones, right? And isn't it called cell phone snubbing?
Yeah.
I mean, what is that doing to our relationships?
Well, it's addictive, and so we just feel this urge as we're sitting there, I need to be checking in. And so a lot of times, if great question, Nancy, I will sit down and I'll say, let me shut this off. I mean, I'm constantly striving myself to be a better communicator, and we have to really be very cognizant of what we're doing, because we become somewhat robotic in checking these things all the time. And so I think what we need to do is distance ourselves from the devices and just put them away, or say to somebody, this is the other thing. I talk about all the time, the most important person you communicate with is yourself. How do I feel? What do I think? But we don't do that. We don't communicate with ourselves, therefore we can't communicate with each other very effectively. But even when you sit down with somebody and say, hey, can we turn our phones off? Can we disconnect? Can we engage? Can we have this conversation? So we need to be very focused on doing that, and we really don't. So there's a lot of work that needs to be around this topic of communication.
And for a lot of couples, right, we tend to communicate then over text.
Right.
And I find that then you lose some of the context in the meaning, or you can read the tone into the text.
Now, I'm a big texter, I will confess to you. One of the things I tell people is to, when you're engaging someone, say, what's your preferred method of communication? I'm a big texter, but I use it as a tool, not as a crutch. There's a difference there. A lot of people will use that as their sole means of communication, but they can't look somebody else in the eye and tell them how they feel. But we can text, can't we? And we can send that off, because you don't get that immediate reaction or that response. I don't have to worry necessarily about what you think and how you feel and how you react and all of those things if I just send that off mechanically. So yeah, it's very true, and it's affecting our relationships all over the place. My kids will text me from upstairs, and I'll say, guys, you know, right? Hey, come on, really? Like I have a rule, no yelling and no, I'm in the kitchen, you know, kind of a thing. But it's terrible. But you've got to call people out on it, and you've got to be aware of it yourself.
And just the importance of communication. You've written a whole book on it,
Yep.
and communicating in life, love, and business. You know,
Yeah.
these three areas that are
Yeah.
so vital. So what is it that you hope your book conveys to people about the importance of communication?
It's the foundation of everything we do. And what I say to people is we're lucky if we were taught social skills. Your parents taught please and thank you and look Mrs. Jones in the eye and shake her hand. But nobody really teaches us how to communicate. Think about this. So we get into problematic relationships, be they personal or professional, and we don't know how to navigate out of them. And so we go dark or we become deceptive or whatever we do to sort of navigate it, right? Because we really, you know, Gandhi said it, and I was glad to find out he said it after I put it in my book. I did this fear diagram. So much of what we do is based in fear. And it all revolves around the communication thing. We're afraid of, if I say this to you, Kim, you may reject me, right? You may confront me. So these are all the fear-based reactions that we have that really prohibit us from having quality, you know, effective, integrated communication. And it's really, really, I mean, look at the world. Look what's going on now. Communication is the foundation of absolutely everything that we do. And I've yet to talk to anybody who says, we need less than that, less of that. Right? It's evergreen. I mean, we need to get better at it. We need to get it into the schools. I have 6 kids, and I've got 2 in their 30s, 2 in their 20s, and 2 in their teens. So it's very interesting dealing with the millennials, dealing with the teenagers. We need to start this earlier. We need to get it into the schools. We need to teach kids how to communicate. We make too many assumptions. Like, hey, I said this, so therefore you understand what I'm saying, Kim, right? And maybe not. So that breakdown occurs that way.
Thanks so much for being with us, Bob.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
But first, some more reflections on this topic from our well of wisdom.
When you're always looking at your phone, when you're walking with your phone, when you're looking at your phone while you're walking, that's when you don't have eye-to-eye contact. If you walk down the street and you don't smile or say hello to someone, I think that's a shame.
I'm a writer, so I value words 100%, but at the same time, there's context and subtext and meaning and motivation and intention that you lose if you're not physically with somebody.
Thanks for joining us once again. You know, an MIT researcher says that we now expect more from technology and less from each other. Interesting quote there. Let's jump right in now and have both of our guests join us once again. And let's start with you, Bob. What do we need to do to guard against technology taking away from our communications and our relationships?
Well, that quote makes me cringe.
Right,
I
doesn't
mean,
it?
the
Yeah.
idea that we're relying more on technology. I mean, I think we need to be conscious of the breakaway. I mean, I think we need to, whether it's turn them off or distance ourselves from those things. It's addictive, and you see the what's it, the dopamine. The professor would know more than I, but that urge that we have to check in. It's really frightening. I mean, it frightens me as a parent and as a communicator and as a consultant that we have that, let's call it an addiction, to be honest. It's really quite scary that really sort of takes over so much of our thinking. I think we need to really be conscious of unplugging.
Yeah, that's a great,
Right.
great point. Absolutely. Well, and Jeremy, you had said that your students actually organically came up with some solutions like putting their phones in the middle of the table when they go out to eat. Were there other solutions that they came up with?
Some of this was just about learning when to put the phone away and to figure out ways to coordinate off from the rest of their lives. A lot of this is about awareness, though. I mean, really, there isn't much you can do. We're not going to uninvent the smartphone, you know, and somebody can take that from my cold, dead hands. I mean, it's just one of those things where you're not going to be able to take that away from people. So instead, if you can make them just cognizant of how they're using their technology, how it's invading their lives, maybe in spaces that are not productive, you know, I think that's part of it. So when the students were seeing moments like that, where they could easily put their phone in a bag and walk across campus, you know, leave the earbuds out of their ears and smile at people as they're walking around. Those were moments that they kind of felt like, oh, this is what I've been missing, you know. But also, it allowed them to look around at how other people were burying their heads in their smartphones, and they were realizing what they looked like now that they were looking at the world through different kind of eyes. So I think it starts with awareness. I don't know if there's a lot you can do to really make this happen? At first, you just have to make people be able to see what's going on first.
Well, it's awareness, of course, and also I would think just working on those communication skills, like you're talking about in your book, just trying to find ways to really make those connections with people.
Yeah.
Say what you mean and mean what you say.
Well, to pick up on what Jeremy said, I mean, I think it's really a tool. You're right, it's not going anywhere, but I remember a couple weeks ago walking through the halls at Johns Hopkins Hospital, and there was a nurse who was like coming right into me, and I that quickly thought, oh, we're going to play this out. And she had her face in her phone or whatever, and I just kept going. And then when she got to be about this far, I said, excuse me, and she said, oh, I'm so sorry. But you could see that clearly she was like, I need to focus on what I'm doing here, pay attention, because people get lost in those things. But Jeremy's right, it's here to stay, but we have to define the proper uses of it. And we have to use it as a tool, as I said, and not a crutch. And for so many people, it really becomes their main way of communicating with folks. It really, maybe I'm old-fashioned, I'm dating myself, but really having 6 children, worrying about them communicating in the world, we need to stop and slow down and just think about where it has its place, as Jeremy said.
And do you have any, suggestions specifically for couples?
Well, I think, what I like to do is there has to be time out. And so whether it's dinner time or whether it's, date night or whatever, you can't leave them home. What I will say to people is when I'm out, because I do have 6 children, is, hey, my phone's here and I need to be reachable. I need to be accessible. I think if you define, because other people are thinking, see, we don't say all the things a lot of time that we're thinking. And why don't we? It goes back to the whole fear thing about communication. So we don't talk about it. But I'm sitting here with you, Kim, and you're thinking, why is Bob doing this, this, and that? So why don't I tell you why I'm doing this, this, and that? So why don't I say, I'm going to have my phone here because I need to be able to be reached by the kids. And then you know what that is. You're not thinking he's not paying attention to me or he's waiting for something more important to happen, right?
Right. Well, it's a great discussion. We could go on, and I wish we had the time, but we don't. But thank you so much to both of you for joining us.
Absolutely.
We'll be right back in the kitchen with a health and wellness tip.
I have the luxury most nights to have dinner as a family, and so I really make a point of asking those kinds of questions that make them think about their day.
You look down at your phone, you're like, another text, another email. And some people are texting you while you're sleeping. I think for us to step outside of that, it has to be intentional.
Welcome back. It seems with all the devices and gadgets we use that we're giving ourselves a lot of aches and pains because of, the way we hunch over when we send a text or an email.
Yeah, absolutely. But we can avoid those injuries with some simple changes to our posture. And so we have a guest with us today, Saparna Damani from the Damani Center in Allentown, and you're going to show us how we can avoid that.
Yes. We're getting more and more dependent on technology. And technology hurts. It's almost an addiction, and we cannot disconnect anymore. So it becomes really important to know how to use these devices. With the phone, or with any kind of mobile device, or even computer use for that matter, I think posture becomes really important. And so let's talk a little bit about standing posture, because we tend to stand on one leg, or the other. Or this is a common posture where you just tend to lock your back. So I think the first thing to remember is that you want to maintain your normal spinal curves. So you want that low back posture, where your low back curves slightly inward, your neck curves slightly inward too. And I always tell my patients that your head should never enter a door first, enter a room first, because this is the posture. And you see our teenagers walking a lot with this posture where the head is so forward.
And I think I read our head weighs like 12 pounds,
yes,
right?
Yes,
so I can imagine the strain.
Absolutely. That's a lot of strain on those muscles to just hold it up. And when you walk like this, your center of gravity being there, it's a lot of weight for these muscles. So where the phone is concerned, let's start first with just trying to stand tall, like a puppet. I always say it's like a puppet, where if you're standing like this and you pull on a string and see what happens, you just straighten up your low back, your chin tucks in, your chest opens up, and there's really no work on part of your neck. Your neck should be totally relaxed. You should be feeling it in your abs. You can think of your belly button as going slightly in and up, and that's the posture you want to maintain.
The only problem is when I stand tall, it's really tall.
and that's great.
Sometimes.
That's a very positive attribute. So with the phone, you know, you want to, obviously looking down is a problem because that puts a lot of strain on your neck. But if you hold the phone up, then it's your arms that your neck is holding up. So variety is the key. You want to vary the activity. Where the phone is concerned, you want to definitely hold it up, you know, but you don't want to reach out because that's hard. And you see how it just throws off this posture here. So a little farther is good so that you open up this angle at the elbow, which is also good for you, and you're not looking down too much. Don't hold the phone with a death grip. That phone isn't going anywhere. Hold it nice and easily in your hands. And when you're texting, you know, rather than using all these small muscles of your hands, you might want to try and move your finger around so you get more of the larger muscle groups and you're not using the small muscles of your hands too much. The worst thing you could do, and we're on a kitchen set, and you know we're talking about technology, but chopping, standing, you know, cooking, you know, using your neck a lot for large families, they can all contribute to this. And I think it's important to remember that repetitive stress injuries are all pervasive. And factory workers are taught how to lift, but yet we load and unload the dishwasher every day, we move laundry every day, and no one teaches us how to move at home.
So it's more of like an awareness, because I mean, when you're, I'm terribly guilty of doing this while I'm cooking.
Absolutely, yes.
So it's an awareness of really what we're doing, I would think, to prevent these injuries.
Absolutely, and your posture and maintaining your spinal curves, because as soon as you do this, you're causing a tremendous crunching of your nerves in your neck. And yes, you know, it seems like the chores go a lot faster if you're chatting on the phone, but it's just as easy to maybe set your phone up, you know,
Use a speaker.
or use a speaker or a headset. Our youngsters watch YouTube all the time, you know, and that's, you know, this is a good way to just prop it up so that you're not holding it all the time. So it's not just about the neck or crunching, you know, it's also about the hand muscles and repetitive use. So the more you vary it, the more you use larger muscles where possible, and simply take breaks. I think that makes a big difference.
Awesome. So thank you so much for being with us. Such great advice and a lot to think about.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on the show.
And that's all we have time for. Thank you for being with us.
Go out and spread some joy today.